Okay, chat, so I guess we'll do our final review of Astalon Tears of the Earth. We're listening to probably one of the best parts of the game, which is the soundtrack. I do think overall this might be one of those soundtracks I go back to in the future. I like the idea of like when you're near a campfire in this game or the save system, that you hear like a calm version of the music. And then you have like the boss music and the other action music elsewhere. But anyway, let's actually go and talk about the game more specifically. So this game borrows a lot of elements from other Metroidvanias, a little bit of Castlevania 3 in here, where you start with 3 party members, a swordsman, a bow girl, and basically a mage. And the intent is that you swap between these characters while potentially also finding alternate characters with additional abilities to clear the dungeons. You might get the ability to reflect attacks in like kind of an action sequence kind of thing where you're looking to reflect things back into mini bosses and things like that, or the ability to kill ghosts, or maybe you'll get some special abilities that really up your damage. I would say the most controversial part of the game is, unlike a Castlevania or a normal Metroidvania, where you get healing as you go along, either by touching save points or by going to maybe specific areas, they might full heal you. This game is initially designed as a roguelike, so you're expected to die, and you're expected to basically unlock shortcuts, so that way when you do inevitably die, you can go back to where you were quicker than before. So I will say the castle design from that perspective is like a almost 10 out of 10, if not for some weird things in some of the bonus modes. I'd say in the main mode itself, it's probably a 10 out of 10. Honestly speaking, like the amount of effort it took in order to consider all the different ways you could progress through the game with different levels of power-ups is actually really impressive. I would say the castle design is easily a lot better than almost every castle we have played in Castlevania. I'm willing to state it. I just felt like the rooms were tighter. I thought the puzzles were actually short but decent. I felt like there was a good mix of shortcuts and hidden pathways. And I really just feel like the movement through the castle, whether you gain the equivalency of like a flight ability or you learn to break walls for the first time, really changes how you approach the game and approach similar rooms, especially if you play some of the later modes and play them as potentially some different characters, and I won't talk about that in too much detail until we go to spoilers. So from that standpoint, the castle, really, really solid. There's only a couple things I detract from it overall, and that's the key system. So they have a concept of you collecting silver keys, which are common, blue keys, which are less common, and red keys, which are very rare and infrequent. I think there's only 4 in the game, for example. And there's a few rooms where it definitely just eats your keys for really stupid things. Like in particular, as we travel like down in the castle, that happened a lot. Whereas like you have to have a key to open this door to open another door that requires this key, and then if you got this far, we'll restore the keys. But if you didn't have enough keys to open that second door, you don't really unlock anything, and those little things do detract it from me. The other thing I would say that from the normal playthrough standpoint that bothered me about the castle design, where it is very big, it's like several hundred rooms, is not the elevator fast travel system, but the key you need to activate the elevator fast travel system. Why did they require a locked door for that? I really don't understand why that is not a mandatory pickup on your way through the dungeons. I have no idea why they put that behind a door that required a key. Especially like so early on, but not early on enough that it's like, it's not like you'll see it in the first 5 minutes. It's like really close to the first, well, technically second boss of the game. But in a way that if you don't have it, you have to backtrack like 10 or 15 rooms plus in a roguelike scenario where every point of damage matters. So that I feel like was probably the weakest point of the game. But don't get me wrong, the rest of the map was really nice, unlocking, you know, you would open up pillars, you'd open up new doors, you'd open up blocks that stop you from climbing, you'd create ladders, you get abilities like the ability to shoot an arrow that activates certain statues. Like, there's a lot of really interesting ways it opens up the map So don't let those little nitpicks like say that it's like a bad map design. I cannot emphasize enough. It is easily one of my favorite maps we've played in any kind of game of the genre, hands down. I had a lot of fun backtracking through it, and kind of enjoying, you know, whether we had warps or we had elevators or whatever equivalency there was. I really just felt like it was smooth, and most of the rooms were extremely tight. I will say the only point I will say that detracts from it, not from a design standpoint of the map itself, which you will spend a majority of the game exploring, but more the screen scroll. There's a couple of points where the screen scroll is like really hard to avoid and can cause enemy positions to reset in bad ways. So there's a couple of sections towards the end of the game where it was really easy to just jump slightly too high on like a moving platform, scroll the screen up, and by the time you fall because you did a short jump in order to dodge a projectile, the platform you jump from is no longer there. So that was awkward, I will say. But other than that, I do think the level design is, as I said before, easily a 9 out of 10. Music, I don't know if I want to say 10 out of 10, but at least a 9 out of 10. I really do like, we're listening to like the SAPE version, for example, of Cruel Mechanism. We heard the original version a moment ago. Character design, I think everybody was making fun of the bow girl, aka massive forehead. I was not feeling her design, to be honest. I guess, I don't know. Everything else kind of goes into more spoiler territory. I'm trying to think of anything else to really cover. I would say if I had to give a short summary, I do recommend the game, but it is a bit of a difficulty curve where I feel like a lot of the difficulty ends up being front-loaded. And I feel like the bonus modes, which I had the most fun in, are like so much easier than the main playthrough, it's not even funny. Like, I think we took about, what was it? You know, me getting lost a lot, it took me like 14 hours on a blind playthrough for 100%. But like playing the bonus mode, we cleared it in what, an hour? Like comparatively? So that should give you an idea. Like they are just so much better as characters, and they feel so much stronger in like every single regard. So it feels like a bit unfortunate for people that want something that's more of a traditional Castlevania difficulty. And I don't mean Classicvania, I mean more like modern Vania, like your maybe even like your Symphony of the Nights, your Aria of Sorrow, where the game is not like, it's not like instantly easy for people that haven't played before, but it isn't as punishing for sure as compared to this game. So you will feel it when you land in the spikes. They're not insta-kill, fortunately, but because there's no way to really heal outside of candles in the main game mode, which are sporadic and only recover when you spend them in a shop, which we'll talk about in a moment, it can be a bit rough to get past the first part of the game, but we fortunately persevered for the first hour and a half, 2 hours, and the game got a lot more fun. Like when we started unlocking things like glide or wall jump, the game was so much more fun. It was like night and day. I almost call it like the Hades effect, and kind of a downside of the roguelike genre in general, where like I might overall like the game, but I will always remember not enjoying the first hour and a half in those kinds of games where we feel like underpowered, we don't feel like we have enough health, it doesn't feel like we have good abilities or reach or things like that. But generally speaking, playing through the game, most of that resolved in the main playthrough at least. So let's talk about probably the most divisive thing in the game, which is the roguelike shop. So every time you die, you have to go all the way back to the beginning of the castle, so hope you unlocked all those shortcuts, etc. But then you can take souls, which you get from just killing enemies or finding hidden deposits or defeating bosses. You get a lot of them in particular, or cracking certain stone faces double your souls. Either way, you come to a shop, you can upgrade your characters to get more damage. It's not bad. What is bad though are the item descriptions. Can I just say, of any game that we've played, these might have some of the worst item descriptions of all time. I'm willing to say it, chat. Even with an extra relic that gives you more details as to what the items do, I can tell you right now, I can't name 75% of what that shop did. Even unlocking it, I still don't know what it did the majority of the time. Like, it is not good. I'm gonna be real frank with you. Like, it took us forever to figure out, like, there's some power-ups that disappear when you die. That's kind of important to know on your first playthrough, whether something is temporary or not. Because if you're expecting to death warp and you're like, oh, I just spent the first hour's worth of souls on things that go away, that kind of gives you a bad impression of the game. So my big warning to people that play is definitely just stick to stats for the most part, and maybe the cartographer ability if you just like to find more about the map itself. But honestly, like, just don't even bother touching the rest of the menu until you're at a point where you have the ability to shop, aka I think it's called gift in that game, without dying, because otherwise you're just going to undo all the progress you did, which feels terrible, I would just like to say. And similarly, a lot of the relics just don't really tell you what to do, and it feels like it's just an unnecessary puzzle to figure out what some of them do without the item update for telling you what the descriptions are. So just kind of a big F, honestly, on that one. I don't know why they thought it was necessary to lock that away. Like, if they were going to do something where the descriptions were updated, I'd rather it go into, like, really fine details. Because let me be clear, when I'm saying item descriptions, it'll say, like, 5 words. Like, you have Eye of Gorgon. And you're like, okay, what does that do? I don't know. You better figure it out. Or you'll get something where it's, like, boots or gauntlets. And sometimes it'll be intuitive in the level design. Like, for example, if you need to get through flames and you get the gauntlet that lets you go through flames, even though the description of the gauntlet doesn't tell you jack that it goes through flames, by the way, you kind of figure out that because it's blocking the exit, you can now get through it. So, like, the stage design actually uses those item unlocks pretty well for the most part, but the text description is just terrible. It's just terrible, chat. And again, if you're looking to understand, like, some of the finer mechanics, like inner fire, like, how does the damage get calculated on that? Or, you know, what's the point of upgrading it? Or what things are temporary versus not temporary? None of that is just there in the UI. You either have to look it up or just find out the hard way that things you spent points on are not worth it. Which is really awkward, as I said before, because those temporary things are mixed with things that are permanent. And all they needed to do was have another menu to say these are temporary buffs, or them in, like, the item description that these will go away. And a lot of the early game frustration of just saying, like, I refuse to touch anything here because I just don't have a good way of getting souls yet, would be gone. And it's such a shame, because it's like, these are very easy things to fix that barely have any impact at all on the gameplay, because the gameplay is really solid. Although I will say, generally speaking, because it is a roguelike, if you find the ability to get a lot of souls as you progress through the game difficulty does fall off a cliff somewhere around the second boss for the most part. Like, the difficulty of reaching the first boss is, like, way different than the end of the game. The end of the game is basically free, especially if you're going for 100% clear. So, as I said before, it's kind of just an issue with roguelike genres in general, where if you get enough upgrades, the game is over. So if you manage to max out your defense, nothing can really kill you reasonably quickly. And there are things that do let you recover health, but they're super late in normal gameplay mode, where there's actually better ways of healing in the alternate modes, which is what I thought was kind of unfortunate. Like, the ability to stand in blood pools to recover health, I thought was really cool. I will say, downside though, they should have marked those differently on the map, specifically for that mode, so you know where they were once you visit the room. And the other point of random food drops, so it's more like a Metroid-style system where randomly enemies will recover your health. I kind of like that more than the main roguelikes portion of the game, which is a shame because the game is built around dealing and balancing all 3 game modes, where the other 2 game modes are very quick-paced. And then there's more of the roguelike struggle of the first 3 initial adventurers. So, kind of unfortunate. I will say the weakest part of this game is easily the boss design. Without going into spoilers, there's a lot of sit around and wait in these boss fights. I would say, weirdly, I think the first boss is the hardest to deal with when you're going into it blind, and then every other boss after that is ultra free. Maybe chat agrees or disagrees, but I don't feel like the level of learning patterns or what the game actually expects for you of bosses is anywhere near as difficult as that first boss fight was. Like, even in boss rush mode, we took way more damage from the first boss of the game than every other boss. Just because, like, you're lacking a lot of ranged abilities, you don't have a lot of great mobility through, like, a gimmick of things that slow you down in the room itself. And it's kind of annoying. Whereas, like, if you play through the bonus mode characters, then it's free. The hardest part of the game is over. You delete the boss instantly. But yeah, you definitely feel how much longer that boss is. And I will say that it is really unfortunate that there's a lot of waiting around, as chat saw. Like, the boss design is definitely the weakest part, which is a shame because I think it actually uses enemies very smartly. It's not like a typical modern Castlevania where enemies just feel kind of arbitrarily copy-pasted into a room and you just kind of ignore them 80% of the time. Like, they're put in very specific spots facing very specific ways. So that way, if you're moving at max speed, they'll be at very specific positions to make it either easier or harder. So it feels a lot more thought out there, and I wish the bosses were kind of on that level and were less about waiting for certain attacks to finish before you attack them. But I think that's about all I can really say before we go into spoilers. I will say, though, for people that are looking for a really solid story, not your game. People playing an action game, I would recommend it. If you could get past the first hour and a half awkwardness of a blind playthrough, I think the game is actually worth playing, especially the bonus modes. But I think we're ready to talk about the spoilers, I guess, of the section. So I do feel like the game really wanted you to just focus the story around the mage, who I want to say his name is August. I'm super bad with names, I apologize. Where he just ended up getting all these power-ups, and he was just so much better than every character. Like, it was just kind of unfair. Remember how many abilities he got early on in the game, chat? Like, I know he has a connection to the Death God, which is where, you know, you can commune with him in order to get upgrades and all, but man, he was just, like, so much stronger than every other character. His basic abilities, his spells that sacrifice health, ridiculous. What a ridiculous character. So if you're just looking to play the game and you just pick the character who looks like is the main character, he is really strong. I will say the bow girl eventually did catch up a little bit to become more useful, but a lot of the bosses just don't suit her playstyle. So I feel like if you did try to play as the Blue Knight, for example, I feel like you would have more luck versus bosses than the bow girl. I just feel like there were so many opportunities where you just couldn't hit them with the bow, but you'd be able to hit them with the sword. Right? Like, I'd only get like 3 shots, for example, on the worm boss. That was the second boss of the game. Whereas the knight would be able to slash, 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 and do like 1,000,000 damage. I think there was like maybe one boss she would have been good at. Like, she would have been good at the final boss, for example, where you have to stand on a platform and shoot the, you know, the big shiny. I definitely think she's probably the best for that fight. But other than that, the mage basically dumpsters every single boss in this game. And the knight is not bad if you're looking for more of a balance. He does start with slightly better defense, so there is a little bit less punishment for picking his close playstyle. But yeah, just overall the mage was just clearly one of the best characters of the game. When you unlock his little shock field ability, you literally one-button kill most things. If you've been upgrading almost nothing but attack, you literally one-button everything until basically the final dungeon. It's kind of embarrassing. Those poor mid-bosses that show up, though, the Cyclops and, like, the Bouncing Eye, for example, I like their concept where they, you know, they play their own theme music over the area music. But man, they were just kind of a joke for the mage in particular. Although I will say, you know, at least it felt kind of fun to play as the knight when he got the dash boots and stuff like that. So I feel like he was probably my favorite character early on, before we got any crazy abilities. But once we started getting access to souls, I just felt like the mage was better in every single regard. But 0 upgrades, I like the knight more, because his stats were just better balanced, to be honest. And once you got the shockwave sword attack that reflected projectiles, that made learning the game so much easier. So I like that there's like not only different playstyles unlocked in the game, but also I feel like the beginning of the game was mostly balanced except for Bowgirl. I feel like they did her dirty. She should have had the ability for her attacks to bounce and ricochet off of walls, in like a shockwave style kind of thing, so much earlier. I mean, you get like what, her rapid jump attack and then, or rapid jump and then nothing for like 60% of the game. Like, think about it, chat. Like, you get the bow that unlocks statues, which doesn't interact in any way with combat, and then you finally get her shockwave attack when you're done with the game. Like, that's kind of too late. Meanwhile, like, the mage can get all this glide, gets it like pretty early, not on the first boss, but by the second boss. The knight has enhanced attack range. I just feel like she needed something that improved her combat a bit more, and I guess you could argue that the wall jump becoming infinite helped with some bosses, but I'm gonna be honest with you, it's not as impactful as the other characters. I mean, the fact that the mage gets glide and like the monster buddy, and then there was that whole weird thing where there was the time travel version of him, but then the game never... I don't think the game ever acknowledged that in the story, right? Like, there were 2 or 3 magic seal rooms we could go into, where it was literally just us from the future, but we don't realize it's us from the future, or don't acknowledge it in the game, to my knowledge. And then we kind of get Monster Buddy, showcasing why the mage is one of the best characters, because he just gets so many extra projectiles. And just so many things that target him in particular. I did have fun with the whip user, who definitely harkens back to like classic Mania, where you're whipping, you throw your axe, and things like that. I thought that was kind of neat. And I think what kind of helps him over the other bonus character is that his stats start really high, so you don't need to like have a lot of investment in him to be useful. And that was kind of the problem with the final bonus character, whose name I think was Zeke. Basically, the kid who throws things like their Toad in Super Mario Bros. 2, where they just carry a block over their head for a majority of the playthrough. I feel like he was by far the worst one, unfortunately. If his stats had started better, it would have been better. Yeah, the Mario 2 character, exactly. I just feel like he should have had the ability to summon the block at will. I feel like that was probably the weakest part of the game, was carrying the gold block to get to a platform and use it once, and then just move around. And then, like, his big unlock is he could spawn the block at will, and I'm like, but I'm already not using him because he's so bad. Like, even with crit up, like, I'd just rather play any character with more range. I guess it's kind of nice that the whip character and Zeke could also deal with ghosts, I guess, possibly by default. I guess. Yeah, I really like the whip user in the normal mode versus like boss rush mode, because he also had the ability to scale in damage based off a number of kills, and that was actually pretty fun. So for a character with like very minimal investment, like you could leave almost all of his stats the same and just unlock that. I think he was like actually genuinely worth using. If nothing else, just to tank things as you're going through if you're not sure you'll survive a hit, because he ends up with a lot of defense. I just feel like he had much more utility and way more usage in general exploration than Zeke, unfortunately. It is a bit shame that you get the wall crush super late in the game, but honestly, I feel like he's probably the most balanced bonus character, because again, he starts with a massive amount of attack, he starts with a massive amount of defense, so he doesn't need as much to cap his upgrades. And his normal passive is really good for casual play. So even if you're not playing as him specifically, but you're just getting souls in order to upgrade your other characters, because you want to see what these abilities do, because, again, the descriptions don't really help. Like, Static Field should just read, use this and you break the game. Honestly, like, that damage is disgustingly stupid. But from the standpoint of general exploration, it was really nice to be able to toggle for a character that could use a projectile that arced through walls and hit things that you normally wouldn't be able to do in order to get some things slightly out of order, for example. I just felt like he was a much more interesting bonus character overall, where there were definitely times where I was like, he contributed something unique to the room, and I feel like he helped me basically 1 or 2 shot certain enemies, which also sped general clear, where like because I'm focusing on the mage, my knight with dash doesn't have a lot of attack power, so it would take him like 6 or 7 swings, or just 2 whip swings from the whip user, who is again very minimal point investment. So I think most of the bonus characters were fine except for Zeke. I think the whip user, maybe people used him or didn't use him, but I had fun with him. I will say, though, playing as the Black Knight, aka the initial character that kills you in the normal gameplay, I really did think he was overpowered, but there's nothing wrong with that. You kind of earned it after you're done with the game. You sacrifice a little health and you summon the Death Orb. Chat remembers that hit point drain. It's like, yeah, I could attack for 40, or I could do 90 times 3 in the same number of seconds and frames with the spell. That attack was actually busted. The fact that it took me like 30 minutes or so to realize you could actually aim the spell because he kills so quickly is really funny to me. So it's like, why bother aiming? It just kills instantly. And then we used it to like curve our shots upwards and hit switches we weren't supposed to. He does some really crazy stuff to the game. I will say the gargoyle was okay. Gargoyle was okay. It was neat being able to go through some of the places more vertically, I guess. But it was also really awkward he didn't have a spell. I don't know why they designed him without a spell. I'm kind of disappointed in that, to be honest. I feel like that's all he was missing, was some attack that would pierce through walls to kill enemies in case you want to open up switches. So a little disappointed by that, but it's not like a deal breaker. But otherwise, like, I don't know, the whole mechanic of you sometimes get healing at campfires to have story mode to heal was kind of at conflict with the roguelike mode, where it's like, I don't really want to heal at this point, but I want to see what some of the story is. So I feel like that was a weird thing to be in contention with in the game. And again, that mostly just comes to the fact that you don't heal while at campfires. Where I would have liked a mechanic where you at least went to like quarter health or half health. It put you out of like danger health, quote unquote, by using campfires. I would have liked something more than the typical roguelike. But again, maybe that's just because I'm not a big fan of roguelikes in general over just traditional gameplay. But other than that, chat, I don't think there's really much to say about the story. We saw a little bit about the Gorgons. There's flashback sequences you can unlock in the death shop. And they're okay. I mean, it's not like game breaking or anything. So if you want to learn a little bit of lore, it's there. But overall, I liked, as I said before, the game design. I like the action. I'm hoping that if they do a sequel or a prequel, since this game is technically the second in the series, that it started that way, that they explore maybe other game genres. If they want to go back to like literally like, I don't know, what is it, like Belmont's Revenge or something, whatever the old Game Boy Castlevanias are, if they want to do a style like that, maybe it'd be interesting to see. But again, I wouldn't mind another castle just like this one if they wanted to continue the genre. So at the moment, I'm interested in continuing the series. So if we get any more news on it, I will let the chat know, and we will probably pick it up at some point. But otherwise, I don't think there was anything too egregious that happened in our playthrough. We did get stuck once, which was awkward. And again, that has to do with the screen scroll, where I thought of the castle design is really good, but then there's sometimes you could back into things that are one ways and get stuck if you go the wrong way through them. So again, it's just it's why it's a little hard to give it a 10 out of 10 on the castle design. Yeah, we technically played other games from Dangan Entertainment, who made this game, because they did the why am I blanking on it? Brain blank. We're going around and building decks, and we had like the Traveler build and stuff like that. Chat knows what I mean. Got stuck once, broke the game, saw things we shouldn't have so many times. Yeah, there were a couple of weird visual glitches on the bonus mode, which was a bit weird. But I think overall, you know, it was mostly stable. I guess it was fine. Dungeon Drafters, that's what it was called. I didn't think about that for a second. So I will say the UI was better than Dungeon Drafters. I will say the only thing that I didn't like in this is there needed to be an off for the monster flashes. It's okay if they flash a little bit, but like, what was it, the third boss in the game and fourth boss in the game, they flash colors for like almost a solid 30 seconds. And that's kind of not okay from a disability standpoint. I guess I should have put that in the non-spoiler section, but whatever. But yeah, I definitely feel like, you know, there's a couple of like they blink and they fall in like the beat 'em ups of like SNES, Sega Genesis era, but they didn't usually sustain it forever like they did in this one. So I would say hopefully if they do another one, you could just turn that off or make it that the color change is a lot less drastic in between. Because we set it from whatever the normal was, which I don't even want to know what the normal was, to just moderate. And even that was like really excessive compared to other things. And it's a shame because that only impacts like a few monsters in the entire game. But it was annoying. And as I said before, I do see that as an issue from a disability standpoint. But otherwise, chat, I don't think I have anything else to really add. If chat wants to make any comments on it, feel free to. I'm just thinking about if there's anything I didn't really cover. Oh, I guess I will say it's kind of neat that there is like a secret system unlocked. So it's nice that it gives you like incentive to try out the bonus modes. So for example, we got to see like alternate art. We got to see, you know, secret bonus stuff for potentially the next story they're doing. We got to see different portraits or unused monster designs. So I like that even if nothing really impacted the game mode specifically, I like that seeing different endings and trying different things did give you more incentive to do it. I think that's how you should do secrets in games, where weirdly enough, those hints were actually good. The hints were written well there. Item description bad, hints there good, where it's very unambiguous what you need to do. Not necessarily how to do it, but like, you know you need to beat it as X, or you know you have to unlock this, or you know you need to see another ending. So you have an idea of what you should be aiming for, and then as you continue to unlock more secrets, it gives you more hints. So you'll start off with like one thing unlocked, and then the surrounding secrets you'll get a hint, and then you beat one of those, and then those surrounding secrets get a hint. I thought that was actually a really good system. But otherwise, chat, I don't really think I have anything else to say. I think we covered everything. So let's, I guess, go ahead and say goodbye to YouTube. So if you did watch to this point in the video or the VOD, I'd like to say thank you for watching, and I guess hope to see you again, potentially in this series, sometime again in the future.